Hi, Tim here with Wendy Heilbut, founder and managing partner at Jayaram Law, a law firm that advises clients globally on the critical intellectual property and commercial matters and disputes. Wendy also previously worked as an associate at Jones Day in New York. She's also an angel investor with 37 Angels and mentored numerous accelerators such as Rebecca Minkoff's Female Founder Collective, Monarch Incubator, WeWork Labs, Backstage Capital, and several others. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Kison? It's awesome to be here and really fun to get a chance to chat with you.
Hey, my pleasure. Can we kick things off with a little story about your background?
Sure. My professional background, I'll start there. I took a few years between undergrad and law school. I was actually working in recruiting and kind of realized that there were things I liked about it, but wasn't for me for the long term, and ended up going to law school. I was living out in San Francisco. This was sort of 2000 area, and the dot-com, the first sort of big bust was happening. So that San Francisco wasn't such an exciting time at that moment. Everyone was sort of losing their jobs. And I moved back east and went to law school in DC and came up here to New York, where I am now, for a job. And then really haven't looked back. I've stayed in New York. I worked, like you said, at Jones Day for a handful of years. I left when I was having my children and took some time off to be the stay-at-home parent, and then came back to practicing law about 5 years ago and joined a former business associate. We weren't actually colleagues at the same law firm, who had started Jayaram Law, and helped him found that. And here we are, going crazy this year. Everything's just exploding in a really positive way for us.
That's always a great sign. What are your top three principles to success?
Let's see. So I got a little heads up that this question was coming, so I was able to put my thoughts together, but I will be honest, it came pretty quickly when I started thinking about it. The first one, I say rigidity, I think really is the death of joy and creativity. And so if you want to have a creative life, a creative experience, a creative profession, I think allowing yourself some flexibility is huge. I'm in a profession where there is so much rigidity, you have to constantly fight against that. But I do see it. I see in the moments where we allow ourselves to be a little bit flexible is when we can actually experience joy in our work and creativity can blossom. That's my first one. Second, I always try to surround myself by people I respect and people who I think are smarter than me, and I believe are smarter than me, and I know are smarter than me. So when I'm hiring, and I've pretty much hand sort of hired all of our team along with everyone else, but I've had a hand in every person we've hired. That's something I'm always looking for. And I think if you've got a team and people around you, whether that's professionally or even just your friend circle, that you respect and you know that they are smarter than you in perhaps certain areas, I think that's going to propel you. And the last one is really a management style, which is I try not to delegate, but sort of lead from behind, empower people to take over, empower people to step into their own leadership. And then not only are you going to, hopefully, assuming you've surrounded yourself with these wonderful people, you're going to get it off of your plate. Does that teach a person to fish? It's sort of now they're empowered to do it themselves next time, and they've learned some skills in executing and hopefully can expand on those.
These are great. This is where we have fun and take them apart and make them into
Oh,
some
okay.
practical how-tos.
Great.
So the first one, rigidity, and this is in the sense of not being rigid. But when you explained it, the thing I was thinking of was giving the freedom to create.
Yeah.
How do we turn this into a practical how-to?
I see. Okay. So it's tricky because on one hand, one of the things that I really like, and I find my days go the best when I either at night or first thing in the morning take a few minutes and I use a pencil with a literal piece of paper or day planner and write out my day. And I block out things that are set. So calls, meetings. And then in those empty blocks, I try to put in the priorities of what I really want to get done that day, because otherwise I spend my day in a reaction mode, reacting to the hundreds of emails that come in. This is very basic sort of principles. So on one hand, I absolutely advocate that. On the other hand, I rarely look at it. Once the day starts, I rarely look at it. But I think the key is the exercise to doing it probably allows that creativity, because you've got, okay, I blocked out 2 hours for this project or 30 minutes for this project. Then is in my mind that getting that project done is a top priority of the day, or we always say top priority in the United States or in this current culture, and priority is one. So I try to correct myself when I say top priority, because it is, priority means one, really only supposed to have one priority. But in your day, you've maybe identified 3 goals for the day, let's say, and one is your priority and 2 others are hopeful. How to there is to create frameworks, and we can take that beyond just our day, and maybe this goes to our week, our month, our year, our career, et cetera, et cetera. Create those frameworks and then step away from them a little bit and let them take their own course. I don't know. Is that digestible or still a little vague?
I will say it sounds like almost a balance where you got to have some structure to know where you should be spending your time, but then be able to know that from there you just give yourself the room to be creative or find those areas that you can get out of the typical regimen. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Oh, no, no,
Mhm.
that's absolutely right. And I think that I tend to find that the minute I start talking about something, it's going to happen because you're just starting to, the pieces that you can talk about it as you're putting the energy out there on one extreme, if you're into that, or the really the scientific is you're actually talking about it. So you are starting to do it. So of course it's going to start to take force. You may have to push it along the way a bit. But so having those conversations, those moments where you write it down on your paper and then, yeah, stepping away and having that balance of not fixating on it.
That's true. I find myself there's like times a day when there's certain tasks you're better at. Like my morning, I can
Yes.
get the little structured tactical stuff, and then the creative design type of work I'll do in the evening, where just you're a lot in a different mind frame altogether.
Totally. And then I think there's some people who feel the opposite, that feel they're fresher in the morning for that creative. I think that's probably a really important piece too, is seeing when in your day, you're going to flex in and out of your different tasks.
So I guess it's like finding balance in yourself between having that rigid structure, giving yourself the bandwidth to be creative, but then getting to know yourself and when and where you should be doing these different activities.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Should we chat about surrounding yourself around the right people? Because the older I get, more I believe that we are the average of our five closest relationships.
You said your five closest relationships.
Yeah,
That's
that
fascinating. So what does that mean for us with kids? I think it's a
I,
positive.
I think so. As long as you're a good leader for them and trying to shape them in the right direction.
It brings our average to a more youthful, probably just a youthful mental state, right?
I think so. If you could take the break and just, my favorite thing is if you can go back and say, hey, instead of me trying to take my parental responsibilities as seriously as I can, why don't I take this as an opportunity to really relive my youth? Go back to the time when I used to really enjoy playing Lego blocks and things like that. And, I did. The kids wanted to learn how to ice skate. So I never knew how. I learned with them and took a couple of good
Totally.
falls.
Yep, yep, yep. I was out shooting hoops with my son yesterday, which is something like I barely could do. And at a certain point, I think he wanted to just play by himself. But it was definitely one of those moments of like, all right, I'm going to learn.
Yes, I think that's how you take it. But yeah, in this context, I think being conscious about who you're surrounding yourself with is probably one of the key things.
Yeah, I think so. And I think also recognizing that whatever your role is within your just stepping outside of the family too, actually, family, friends, et cetera. But I'm talking sort of work a little bit. It's easy to think, oh, I'm the boss or I'm your supervisor. I know more than you, but that's rarely true across the board, probably almost never. I don't think you're going to find anyone in any organization who knows more than everyone else on everything. So I try to think about that a lot, that I may know more on this substantive issue we're working on that I've done more times than you, but you may know more about how to implement this process, or you may know more about how to communicate effectively with this type of person that we need to communicate with, or whatever it might be. I try to think about that a lot, or keeping something organized, or keeping a project on pace, or there's so many, no matter what field you're in, there are so many aspects to everything you're doing that people on your team are going to have skills that you don't have. And rather than feeling like, oh, I don't know everything, or, look to them to step in and support you.
I think this is a big one in terms of getting to the goals that you want to achieve. Is thinking about, and maybe even career wise, hey, you're still in school, but you're aspiring to get into this certain career that could be unique. Let's pick, I don't know, electrical engineering. But to be able to start networking or getting associated with those folks that are in that industry to allow you to get exposure to it and trying to do that as early as possible. I guess, have you found a formula in terms of utilizing that approach of surrounding your right people to be able to help yourself with some of these goals that you're looking to achieve?
I probably tie it with the third one about the not just delegating, but actually kind of leading from behind, where I try to think, because my day I'm doing substantive legal work for clients. I'm managing the firm, which can be everything from very strategic to very mundane minutia, especially in times like this. I was on a call this morning dealing with some COVID protocol type stuff, like very granular minutia stuff. So I get in the weeds and overarching on the firm management. And then I'm also growing a company. So there's a lot of business development work and presenting the firm to the public to grow the brand, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like I'm doing all three of these things all the time. And there's only so many hours in the day. So I think what I tend to try to think about is with every single person on my team and every touch point I have, how can I play to this person's skill set to take something off my plate and give it to them? So I'm always kind of thinking like, okay, this person who's our, billing manager is really great at moving the ball forward on these types of projects. So I'm just going to tell her she's in charge. I know she can do it. She may need some questions answered, empower her with the right people to talk to, and just know that that's a skill set she's got. And I'm going to play to that. So I'm kind of combining the two. But so I think the takeaway, the nugget there is as you're moving forward on your own goals, whether that's your goals for the day or again, your professional career goals, thinking about all the people in your community or your network that, and playing to their strengths to help you move the ball forward, whether that means things that they are maybe excited to do that you don't need to do, or things that they're excited to do that they can help teach you how to do. I think that's sort of the thinking there. Yeah.
You're cheating. You're combining them.
I know. Sorry. Let's give the second one a better takeaway.
Well, I like where you're going with it. I like how you tied them together too, which is interesting. Where, hey, can you help find people their strengths and let them take lead or encourage them? That's one thing I've noticed. If you can get people in a direction and they start being proactive, they speak up, then they sort of take a lot more ownership and drive better results. I'd be curious at other little angles in terms of building your
Yeah.
network to help yourself. Because there's almost like the personal development where, hey, like I was telling my daughter, imagine the person that wants to be really good at gymnastics. And if your five closest friends were all active in gymnastics, you're going to learn from them. They're going to
Yeah.
be constantly talking about it. It's going to be on top of mind. They'll be talking about their practice. You'll practice together. They'll teach you new things. And you just tend to really get good just because of that network or the people you've decided to put yourself around. So it's like the personal development, but then here's like a goal around it too. Is it advancing that certain area?
I think that's such a perfect example. And I was thinking about it so like siloed in my career, but I think that's right. Like when you're building your network or you have your own goals. And for younger people too, as you're in school and maybe you're focused on in your day a lot of your academics. But right, like I think also, so there could be a specific goal you have, like you want to become really good at gymnastics. And so you start to communicate and interact in those sort of communities. Also thinking about the type of person you want to be. My daughter has a friend who she'll talk a lot about this friend being really sensitive. I don't want to use that's not the right word, but maybe taking things to the next level at points where maybe it wasn't meant that way. Anyway, this is sort of a repeated theme. And now I'm suddenly seeing my daughter behaving that way too. And so I'm trying to talk to her about, hey, you're learning this behavior. And, my daughter's 8, so we're talking about very young children. So that too. So if you want to be the type of person who is going to be the president of the student council at your school, let's say, and is really comfortable speaking publicly and advocating for things and moving things forward, if all of your friends like to sit at home and play video games on the weekend, well, you're not going to get to exercise those skills. And by the time you get to high school and want to be in those leadership roles, you may not have those skills. So I think just like the gymnastics, there's also sort of that interpersonal play. So maybe if you're that kind of a person and your best friends from elementary school are moving in one direction, you can maintain those friendships, but maybe you're also adding joining the debate team or whatever it might be that's going to let you start branching into some other parts of yourself so you can nurture those sides too and balance them out. And then maybe your five closest friends ultimately end up being from very different parts of who you are, and you can balance all those parts out.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a strategy of its own. You got to be conscious about who you're associated with because it
Totally.
reflects you from just people's external perspective, but just the way you develop and evolve.
Totally. Yeah. And the parts of you that you're exercising, exactly, and developing. Right.
Do you got anything you want to add on just don't delegate to teach and empower?
Yeah, I mean, this one, I think went into it a little too much, maybe when we were talking more about the second one, but I guess I would say with that one of my favorite things is helping encourage people to take leadership from their earliest sort of moments that they can do that. And I think people surprise themselves because leadership is something that's hard to teach. And I'm not even sure. So many of us just develop leadership without being taught it. It's just something that we, I think, learn little by little as we grow, hopefully. When I get the chance to interact with people, I don't know where they are necessarily on their leadership growth plan as far as what they're capable and incapable of. So I tend to be a little bit of a jump in and try it and let's see how it goes kind of person. And then sometimes it's too much and I have to sort of rein it back, which can be hard for me because once I've pushed someone out, I like to watch them take over. But sometimes, you got to go and lend a hand. So what would be the nugget from there? The sort of takeaway, I think, is it's sort of a trust thing, and bringing it back to your own, if you have your own goals and moving forward on your own goals, is trying to trust and empower others to grow in their own ways, that's going to support them probably in their goals too, that we all are so interconnected that just because you think you know something better doesn't mean you have to be the one to drive it, frankly.
Now, that's a key point that you do have to spend the time to develop a level of trust because ultimately that's what will lend to you giving the confidence to get the other person to empower them to really want to take lead.
Yeah. And there's going to be stumbles. Everyone's going to stumble, and that's okay. Pick up the pieces and move on. That's a critical moment to learn altogether.
Is it just tolerating some of those points of failure, or is there like a point around encouraging it and saying, hey, I think of the one example with the kids, it's always like, it's okay to fail. I just want you to be able to explain why you failed or what you learned from it.
Yeah. No, it's a good one. I was thinking of a work example, but I think the parental example is even harder, right? Like if your kids don't do their homework, okay, there's going to be an obvious repercussion, which is they're going to come to school and they're not going to have their homework. And so at night, when it's bedtime and they share with you that they forgot about it or just were too busy doing other things to be bothered with homework, there's always that moment. Okay, do you have your kids stay up? My kids and yours are young enough that homework doesn't take 3 hours. So maybe it's stay up an extra 20 minutes and get it done and be ready for school. Or, hey, no, it's bedtime. You're going to have to take the repercussions of tomorrow. I tend to, with kids, err on the latter, say, nope, it's bedtime. And if you want to get up early and finish it in the morning, that's on you. Or the kids take a school bus, so they can sometimes get stuff done on the school bus. And I think that's my approach at work too. It's sort of like I'm in a very high touch industry as an attorney, and our clients are expecting deliverables. So sometimes it's a matter of watching somebody send an email to a client that's maybe not perfect, and that can be really painful. So that's one where it's client interaction where I do try to be much more hands-on and make sure that the person's really ready to be sending direct communications to a client and work with them on drafts and revisions of drafts of even just simple emails before they're ready. But even then, once somebody's ready, or even a partner of mine, I could see an email go out and say, "Ooh, I would have said that differently." Doesn't mean it's wrong, but watching. Yeah, I guess to answer your question, I think I tend to be the type of let's let it happen and see what you learn from it and see what I learn from it.
That really works. Is sort of seeing what happens and then just communicating the lessons learned.
Yeah.
What's the best mistake you've ever made?
I was thinking about this question because it's hard to call it a mistake because I look back on it so positively now, but there were points when it felt really clearly like a mistake, which was taking time off between my years in big law and my years of what I'm doing now. It was such a gift to focus on my family for a handful of years, certainly a luxury that this was something that my family could support and I could do. But then when I wanted to get back into, and I didn't know I was going to go back to law, I sort of thought like maybe I was done. And then I really wanted to get back in, and it felt really difficult. It felt like an uphill battle that I wasn't going to be able to overcome. And then once I did start working with Vivek and start practicing again, I felt sort of ashamed for years that I had taken the time off, and I tried to kind of hide it and mask over sort of the years where I wasn't practicing. And then at a certain point, a couple of years ago, I sort of just settled into it a little bit. And now I look at it as such a positive for me, for sure, but also just a positive story I love to get out there because it's very hard for a lot of parents who have taken a similar path to get back in. I've spoken to so many parents who either feel like they can't take off any time or they'll never get back into their professional career, or if they've already taken time away from their professional career, that it's impossible to get back. So I love being a success story to share and to try to be somebody that people can learn from in that regard.
Yeah, no, that's a really perfect example that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to.
And to employers and people who would be considering hiring somebody after they've been away from their professional career for a few years. So that's another huge, let me get that message out, that just because somebody left for a few years doesn't mean you're not getting a fabulous member of your team.
Oh yeah, it all comes back. It's like those skills just don't go away.
Totally. And you've gained new ones, as you know, as a parent juggling. I mean, it's just tremendous what you learn. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I think we got time for one more question. What advice would you give to the next generation of leaders?
I don't want to say the like obvious, which is whatever you love, be passionate, and whatever you love and are passionate about, jump in and dig in. But it's sort of that. It's if you're interested in something, even if it might be a passing fancy, because you're going to learn from it no matter what. But if you're interested in something for the day, for the year, for the month, for the career, whatever it is, dive into it as fully as you can and move the ball forward on it. So let's say you're in school or maybe you're in college and you're taking a course that maybe is outside your major, but just because you think it could be kind of interesting, dive into it, sink yourself into it and see how you can add some value there. And then when you are in your professional career or you're moving towards a certain goal, every opportunity and every touch point you have, see how you can bring your own value to it, your own unique imprint on it, even if that feels small to you. The best people in my life as leaders, whether it was working on a PA Parent Teacher Association project at my kids' preschool or in my professional career now, or people I remember from school, were the people who, no matter what it was they were doing, that they made it personal, made it unique, and brought their own. And that's who you remember because they showed their whole selves.
I like where you're going with that. You got a theme around following your passion, but then adding your own unique characteristic to it.
Yes, and I love that we're in this time, and for especially for the next set of leaders, because they're already putting us there really truly, and they will even more, the next round of appreciating everybody's differences and seeing how everyone's differences actually raise the tide. So we're not all kind of living the path and the message of one vision. We're living the path and the message of many, many viewpoints. That's it. It's bring that to the table because you're only going to help elevate the whole conversation and whatever it is you're doing, whether you're working on a paper with a team or you're designing the newest iPhone, whatever you're doing, bring your own unique imprint to it.
Awesome. Wendy, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, you too, Kison. Thank you.